Good morning, everyone. My name is Chen Jiaxi. Today I'm going to talk about editing in other fields. The contents can divide into 5 parts. First is job opportunities in PR and advertising. Second is public relations. Third is print advertising. Fourth is broadcast advertising. Fifth is jobs in book publishing. Job opportunities in PR and ad. PR and ad are closely connected to the media. Ad is the major way American media are financed. PR is one of the major news sources in the U.S. Both ad and PR try to influence our attitude about businesses, groups, people, and issues. There is a distinction between PR and ad. Advertising has been described as outward persuasion. Public relations as covert persuasion. Advertising sells products. Public relations foster goodwill for organization, person, or cause. Advertising works mainly through mass media, although it may be through smaller native media like flyers. Public relations works through news releases, press conferences, publicity events, sponsorships, and sometimes advertisements. Mass media charge for advertising space or time, but they often give free publicity. Advertising is regulated by the government, PR isn't. The main difference is that advertising messages are controlled by those who put them out, but PR messages aren't. They are at the mercy of journalists. There are more opportunities in advertising and PR. Many new advertising graduates get their first job in ad and PR. Some journalists switch to ad and the PR industry. The salary is 20% higher than that in media. Women tend to rise faster. Jobs involve a wide variety of duties. There are more and more ad agencies and PR firms. The skills required by PR position. The most important traits in this order: ability to write, verbal skills, professionalism, maturity, poise, appearance. The ability to work with others and to compromise are good traits for a PR position. Public relations. The main PR work is to write and edit news releases. PR firms is the #1 source of news. News releases should be accurate and truthful, need professional ethics. It means the media's target market should be short and to the point. Develop a working relationship with the editors help you get attention. The quality of the publication is important. The best tip is to write press release like a news story. Don't make the mistake of writing your press release like an ad. You should master social networking media. Print advertising. Here is a comparison between news department and advertising department. For finance, news department need cost, advertising department get revenue. For headline, news department focus on story, advertising department focus on where. For importance, it is half-half. And here comes the AIDA for the advertisers. A means attract attention, I means build interest, D means create desire, A means compel action. Broadcast advertising. Broadcast advertisers need to work with all forms of communication: the written word, graphics, audio, and video. Radio ads has only one dimension, which is sound. TV ads is major and expensive and need more skills. Jobs in book publishing. For graduates, there is 2 paths. One is to work for a university press or a specialty press. Second is to attend a publishing institute. Suggestions: English and journalism are good major for this job. To keep up on the book publishing business, read Publishers Weekly and retail bookseller. Also follow the New York Review of Books and the New York Times best lists. It will be useful to familiarize yourself with style books and the field of the book. Bad news in book publishing. The jobs aren't very stable. Digital books and e-readers are changing the book publishing world through their own websites. Most publishers have only small staffs and use those of freelancers. Here comes the quiz. Let's do it together. True and false question. First, Advertising has been described as covert persuasion. It is false, because it is overt persuasion. Second, public relations fosters goodwill for organizations, person, or cause. It's true. Third, the ability to work with others and to compromise are good traits for a PR position. It is true. Thank you.
Let me add a few comments to that. I will pull it out and bring it to you in a second, okay? I'm going to try and go backwards here and I've worked in all of these industries, and so let me add a couple of insights. First off, actually most of my research recently has been on marketing because it became clear to me 10 years ago when Barack Obama won the U.S. presidency based on his use of social media that the world was it's changing very rapidly. And at the same time, I saw the American newspapers sinking and realized that if I had a future in the industry, if I needed to understand the new world of marketing that relates to that supports the media. And so I started becoming more and more involved. And so in the last 2 years, I've had 10 book chapters published on that subject, and basically on online marketing. It relates some to offline marketing as well. 10 book chapters in 5 different books. Because if actually I am taking a leave of absence as of the last day of August. And I'm going back in the publishing business and starting a new company, and whether I will, I'm planning to come back, but that will depend a lot on not whether or not the company is doing well or not well. It may depend, in fact, it could, either way, could cause me to come back. If it's doing real well and kind of working on its own, then I can come back. And if it's not doing well, I would come back. Anyway, so that's not a direct correlation with what my plans are, but it's just an opportunity that I see that will allow me to utilize these different skills and this different knowledge that I've been able to accumulating for the last 10 years. I just feel compelled to pursue it. So it is still very much of interest to me. In the field of, well, it gave you that chart, if I can find that chart again. This compares advertising to PR. And actually this chart is way out of date now. It's not true anymore. Because of the new trends in marketing, we tend to, first off, let me just make a distinction. We tend to equate advertising with marketing almost directly, like synonyms, and that's not quite true. Marketing does include PR also. In its broadest sense, marketing includes advertising and PR and sales and lots of other things. So first, let's clarify that. But even in comparing advertising and PR, it has become clear that a concept that was being floated before the World Wide Web called IMC, Integrated Marketing Communication, is now almost a must. It's a no-brainer. You have to do IMC nowadays, Integrated Marketing Communication, which what you're basically saying is somebody has to oversee advertising, PR, sales, all aspects of marketing, not just, we had totally separate departments before that primarily, before 1990. IMC was a new idea, basically, in 1990, gaining momentum. It still doesn't actually, even now, even though the rise of online marketing almost compels IMC, it still doesn't always work real well. The coordination between advertising and PR is not always as good as it should be. And indeed, one solution has been to go ahead and put in a whole other department, which is basically online marketing, social media marketing, whatever they want to call it, to tie the two together, because online marketing is both advertising and PR, and it's very hard to separate them. For example, there's a type of advertising called native advertising that is rising so quickly that the estimation is that within the next 3 years, it will represent about 75% of all advertising. Well, native advertising is basically made to look like it's not advertising. Native advertising is made to blend in with its organic content. So if you go to Facebook, you will go down the timeline and you'll see some items on the timeline that in very small print say sponsored. Sponsored means native advertising. Now, some of them do native advertising well and some don't. Some of that native advertising blended into the timeline is so obviously advertising that it's probably not very effective. But the concept is that advertising is no longer effective when it's too overt. And so that very first line under advertising is now a lie. Because people don't like overt, don't like overt pressure on them to buy something or to decide something. And so now everything tends to be going more covert. Also, native advertising is actually, you might say, it emanated out of what we call inbound marketing. Inbound marketing is free advertising. So free marketing anyway. So inbound marketing is posting on social media, especially that. It is then using social media and other search engines and other things like that, other free tools to get people to come to your website. So the inbound marketing, or sometimes called content marketing, is basically more of the realm of PR than it is of advertising. That's why I say it's almost impossible not to include both of them now, because the best products in advertising are now best created by PR people. They're created to be covert and subtle and maybe emotional, or in other ways persuasive in a more subtle way than the overt persuasion of the traditional advertising. So the best current marketers, the best current advertisers, no longer have an advertising background. They now have a PR journalism background, which changes everything. I'm going to jump out of this and just a second to show you what I mean. Okay, I'll come back to this, however, but meanwhile, I want to go over to a website of mine to show you something I did many moons ago. So if you go to my website, virtual-university.us/Ken, among other things, you will find PR marketing examples, and I'll go there. And one of the things that I put on there recently, because I just barely kind of realized how important my work was a long time ago. This was created, and it's not the best in the world. This was actually for when I ran for public office and won very easily. I created my advertising to look like, to be more readable. Oops, I need to adjust the computer here. And so this was a brochure. First off, I used my desktop publishing and publishing background to be able to print. It's a 4-page brochure, actually. This is just the front page here on the right. I created that and had it inserted in newspapers and put it in, taken house to house and so forth. And I spent less money than anybody else. There were 8 candidates running for 4 positions. I spent less money than anybody else and got the most votes of anybody else. And so by using more of a news approach, people liked that. This was in the 1990s, 1994 is when I did that. Can't remember, let me scroll down. So this is page 2, and anyway, down here, this I made, this I ran somebody else's campaign in Tampa, Florida in 1970, I think this probably would have been 1974 when I ran that campaign. And you see what I tried to do was make it look like a regular news page. Now this was fairly revolutionary in those days, in fact very revolutionary. So the idea of this is native advertising. This is native advertising as of 1974, which if you do your math is a long time ago. This is just one of the pages. I have some more here. But the whole idea of this was they did require us to put across the top and across the bottom paid political ad, but it's in very small type, which all advertising is, you know, they put that in all advertising. And even a newspaper that hated this candidate, basically, who tried to do everything they could do to stop him, you know, had to run the ad, and while they required as many little paid political ads in it as possible, the superintendent of public elections, who made sure that all the candidates kept the rules, said, first off, didn't object to it, but secondly, he said he read most of the page before he realized it was an ad, which is exactly the point of native advertising, if it's done well, is you read most of it before you realize it's an ad. Or it's so good that you see it's an ad and you still want to read it. You see some of those in Facebook. For example, there's some, I think there's, I haven't seen them lately, but there were a lot of native ads on Facebook of drone footage, where they'd fly over a country and do some great drone videography. Well, that was good enough that I didn't care that it was sponsored. I still wanted to look at it. There's others like that I'll read it just because I do like the product or whatever. So even some bad native advertising on Facebook still is fairly effective if it's done in a way that's pleasing to people. This was another one of those ads. Again, this one here, I purposely put another ad on it because most inside pages of the newspaper has some advertising. So I went ahead and pretended that he paid for this ad, but really the whole page was his ad. And so I used a number of techniques like that all fell within what we'd call native advertising. And it was effective enough when I took over this campaign. He was number 8 in a field of 8, and only 2 would go through the primary. And I had 3 weeks to get him up to number 2. So you had to go from number 8 to number 2 in this very crowded field of mayoral candidates in Tampa, Florida, and we did it. We came in number 2 in the primary, and then the polls showed him, this was actually an ad for the general election. By then the polls greatly favored my candidate, and he did win almost 2/3 of the precincts. However, Tampa is a mafia town, and somehow, despite winning 2/3 of the precincts, he lost the election by about 200 votes. But it was effective enough that the opposition party came to me and tried to hire me to take over their advertising. I'm not particularly fond of that party, so I said no. Also, by the last week of the general election campaign, a lot of other people were trying to mimic me. There were like 6 or 7 ads kind of like mine in the front section of the daily newspaper there, but none of them were done as well as mine because they weren't done by journalists. They were done by advertising people, and advertising people aren't trained to do it this way. Thus, while they tried to mimic what I was doing, having realized how powerful it was, none of them did it as well. But that's also when, like I said, the head of the other party came looking for me to provide them advertising services. So this is, so native advertising is not a new thing, although what I did was fairly revolutionary at the time, and I never really realized, I never really thought so much about it. I might have built a whole career around native advertising if I'd really, well, first off, if I was after money and not other things, I could have pursued it that way. So anyway, it is, so in this day and age of the social media, the first thing that happened was content marketing or inbound marketing, free use of social media to drive people to your website, built up so quickly and so effectively that it now accounts in America for most of the leads. Paid advertising is dropping, and free advertising is on the rise. Free marketing is on the rise in getting leads and so forth. For companies, even for NGOs, it's very powerful for NGOs and promoting their services and getting donors and things like that. And so it has more than a 2-to-1 lead over traditional advertising now. And so that actually, that trend of content marketing then actually led to native advertising. Because now, once they saw how effective they were making available to people free advertising, the social media said, well, how about if we take your free posting and put it on a whole bunch of news timelines that aren't associated with you. You have to pay us for that, but we will spread your post to thousands of other timelines. And that is native advertising. So they're actually taking the very same content that they may post on their timeline for free, and they're charging them to put it on other people's timelines that otherwise wouldn't receive it. So that is now native advertising in the online market. So again, if you learn how to do it well, if you understand how it works, and you have journalistic skills, including video skills, by the way, some of the best native advertising is video, not print. In my day and age, my early career, never the twain shall meet, but here on the internet, obviously they need to. And video is actually more effective than print advertising, and print native, whether it's native or whatever. And the two actually blend together. They've done research that shows that if you have video on a website, for example, it will also increase the reading of text material around it. So the two blend very well when you go online with it. So it is nowadays very hard to split PR and marketing in the new world. The two are very much overlapping, and in some cases, as I said, they're creating whole new departments to help them overlap. And I don't have time to go through all the details. Some of you, I don't know if anybody here came to my conference last Saturday, but I went into a lot more detail then. So let me see, what else was I going to show you? I do have another website. If you want to understand a little bit more how to convert your skills over into skills in this area, and by the way, even just PR is frankly a much bigger industry than journalism is now. For that reason, we would like to offer PR courses in our department, but we're actually being told we can't. So we may fit them in kind of subtly, but we're not supposed to be PR, which is stupid. But anyway, this website, iei-tv.net/webinar is, this whole domain is mine, but here is a quick version of what I taught on Saturday, so it's like a 15-minute version of it, if you're interested in that. It mentioned in the presentation that the idea of AIDA, which is kind of the formula for traditional advertising, get their attention, then build their interest, I for interest, D is for desire, and then A is for action. And so this kind of goes through the AIDA formula and talks mostly about traditional advertising. But again, those even in traditional advertising, the skills you develop in this department will help you if you wanted to convert to regular advertising too, as far as that goes. But regular advertising isn't regular advertising anymore. There's some others things that you're familiar with that. This is about sales and marketing with an emphasis on Dr. Stephen Covey's 7 Habits. This one's not mine. I think I just put it in there, I think, just to kind of highlight the changes. This one, I think, doesn't even show the name on it. I think this may be the one on PR. No, this is
the material contained in the book synthesizes what you...
I think that's... Oh, this is the one about PR. So anyway, it's basically taking my teachings in the crash course in mass communication into the PR realm. So it basically tells you how to use your journalism skills to be effective in traditional PR, but also it would relate to new PR as well, although it doesn't directly address that. It's more like how to do press releases and stuff, and how to do some of the research you need to do to be good in PR. Anyway, a lot of stuff that relates here to PR marketing and other communications that might be of interest to you. But primarily, it has that one about traditional advertising, has how to adapt your skills to PR, and it has this on online marketing, digital marketing. Those top 3 are the ones that I would recommend that you take a look at. So anyway, this whole area, as far as book publishing goes, I also wanted to check to see if I put it on here. I have another video I might put on here that if you took my history of media course, I think I showed it there, was what we call Author 2.0, and that is book publishing, but independent book publishing. We talked a little bit about independent book publishing in that course. We also talked about independent music production, and that's with this new age of marketing, we're getting a lot more independent production of media of all sorts. But one of them is basically independent book publishing. And there are people who are becoming millionaires in that area, so it's not, you have to work at it, and it doesn't, you have to be a good writer to get to that stage. But there are people who are making a good living, and in some cases getting rich off of independent book publishing. Companies like Amazon and Barnes & Noble will sell your books for you, and they give you a good return on your, like I think Amazon, you get 70% of the proceeds from a book that they sell for you. So they only keep 30%, you get 70%. So they give back a much higher percentage than if you went to a publisher and they took you from scratch. They only pay you less than 20%. So Amazon actually pays you like 3 times as much as you would make if you were if you signed a contract with a professional publishing house. And Barnes & Noble is about the same. There's another company called Smashwords, which helps you market both in all of in those 2 media and their own, and they charge only 20%, and so you keep 80%, I believe is the number currently. So independent, but besides the opportunities with book publishing companies, there's also potential for independent book publishing. Also, with the skills that you're learning in this class, you could also be on the other side of book publishing, which is publish other people's books. When I bought my first newspaper, it also came with a book publishing arm. And so I became a book publisher at the age of 25 too. It was a very, very, well, it was a very targeted market. And so I probably published, I don't know, during the 2 years I had that newspaper before I sold it for a nice profit. I don't know, I may have published, 20 books or something. I don't remember. Maybe a little more than that. I don't remember. But anyway, it's a very specialized area that I had in that book publishing venture. But that was because I did know how to do publishing. And I knew how to put together a book. It wasn't actually with desktop publishing at that point because it hadn't been invented yet. But later on with desktop publishing, I published quite a few books, setting them up with the desktop publishing that you're learning in this class. So the skills in our department can lead you to these other areas, and they could actually be, in some cases, more profitable than if you become a journalist. And I'm not trying to dissuade you from becoming a journalist. I always prefer journalism, and so I still consider marketing, although I always made more money in marketing than I did in journalism. I still consider myself a journalist. That's kind of where my heart is. So I would rather be writing the books than actually doing the actual production of them. But in many cases, my success in the industry has been because I've had very broad skills and I could do the publishing as well as the writing. So I could do the writing, I could do the photography, I could do the desktop publishing aspect. I knew how to negotiate with other. I didn't usually print myself because, as I mentioned, presses are very expensive. So I would take my work to somebody else with a bigger press, and actually I saved money by having somebody else do the printing, but I would do everything, all the setup for them, and just take it to them and say, okay, this is ready to go. I need this, and I need this many books, or I need this many newspapers, whatever it is I was publishing at the time. And so if you do all the setup and take it to them, you may have to talk to them ahead of time, by the way, and find out exactly how they want you to set it up. But then you can use Quark or InDesign and have it ready to go. And as I've mentioned before, actually paper and ink is the least costly of the expenses in publishing. It's all the human labor, which is what costs money, and a lot of that is the desktop publishing, the preparation to go to press and so forth. So if you do that, then the printing, I mean, you have to take it into your budget for sure. You have to recognize what your costs are going to be, but that's the lowest part of the expense. Before I came here, I've mentioned I had a contract with the state of Washington with that bilingual migrant education news, English and Spanish languages. They paid me $55,000 a year to put that out just 4 times a year. My actual printing cost, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was less than $1,000 per edition, and I think it might have been closer to 500. I'm kind of thinking close to 500. It's been a while, it's been 10 years since my last edition. I have to go back and look at my records, but I think the printing cost was more like $500. So 500 times 4 means I only spent a couple $1,000s out of $55,000 contract in printing, and so the rest of that was for my own expenses, for my own salary. And that's why I got the contract, is I was competing against somebody who had to hire lots of people to do what I could do by myself. Even I did pay a gal from Mexico so that I could just write in English mostly. My Spanish is pretty good, and whenever I did write in Spanish, nobody ever corrected it. Nonetheless, I wanted to make sure it sounded natural, native. And so I would do all my stuff in English and give it to my translator, send it to her by email. She would do the translation, send it back to me. And I paid her $500 an issue. And that was the only other labor expense was the translator. So basically, almost all the money from that $55,000 contract went into my pocket. Which with the other company, they had to hire somebody who knew the desktop publishing. They hired somebody else to do the photography, somebody else to do the writing, somebody else to do the translation, and they probably overpaid for the publishing, the printing, because they didn't understand the printing business. And so when I came in with my bid, I more than double, in fact, I quadrupled the number of issues that I put out, and I doubled the size. So I quadrupled the number of copies I would print for them, and I doubled the size, and I did also have to pay for mailing, but it was, that wasn't all that expensive either. But I was able to do that, offer them, making such a good offer, they couldn't refuse my contract offer because I knew all aspects of the business and I could do it all myself, except for some minor aspects of it. And even that I could do, but I didn't want to do, besides the printing. So printing, if you get into the publishing business, does not mean you have to be the printer. You can find people to print, and that's not your biggest expense. That's fairly minor. Okay, well, anybody else presenting today? This is your last chance. This is our last tutorial for sections A and B, or 1 and 2, or whatever you want to call them. I guess the other thing I wanted to just review very quickly is then how we're going to finish up the quarter, or the semester. Next week, I will not be here for the lecture, and so I've already posted on the internet, on the Moodle site, some videos for you to watch in lieu of lecture. One of them is it's old, frankly, it's quite old, but I don't think it diminishes the importance of this interview I had with an award-winning TV journalist. So it's not in video, it's audio with PowerPoint as the visual. But Jim Polk was probably the best TV reporter in America. He had already won a Pulitzer Prize. That's our top journalism prize in America. He'd already won a Pulitzer for his newspaper work, his newspaper reporting, when NBC television network hired him to become their investigative reporting. And basically just said, hey, we need to, at that point, the TV networks were not into investigative reporting. They'd never been very good at it. And so they decided, since he had just won his Pulitzer, that he had high credibility and he had a good voice. And so they hired him to be their investigative reporter. So he was basically their only investigative reporter at NBC TV network. And so he worked there for a number of years, and then, in fact, he was there almost close to 20 years at NBC, and then he went to CNN after that. So he had 15 years in newspapers, close to 20 years with one of the top TV networks in the world, and then CNN after that. So he has a very broad background. And that's one reason why I like this interview, is that he talks about what it was like to change from being a newspaper reporter to a TV reporter. Some things he had to learn, some things he had to adapt to, and some of the differences in the industry that would affect everybody involved in TV journalism. Besides that, I had some other videos that I've shown in the past, not in our class, but that I like to show when I'm talking about video journalism. Two of them are from an organization, it's called the Pulitzer Center. The Pulitzer Center, I don't really think it has a direct tie with the Pulitzer Prize, but maybe it does. But they mainly, it's I think a nonprofit organization that gives out grants to people who have unique reporting ideas, and with an emphasis on international reporting. And so they give people grants to go to Africa or someplace to do a in-depth report on something, and they emphasize, they like to get their teams that they give grants to, they emphasize, try to persuade them to use as much video as possible, because it is more powerful. And so they give some tips on how to do it. So there are a couple of videos showing the tips that they give to people that win their grants, or people who want to win their grants. They do international reporting. There's a couple here by other that actually Pulitzer post on their site related to, they're by professional journalists and talking about the challenges of the audio and the videography. They're really very short and don't go into a lot of detail. I like 4 of these are by a person who actually specialized more in well, he's in broadcasting overall, but he does a lot of work in radio. And so he has 4 short videos here adding up to, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes or something is all, about the audio portion of either radio or TV. Obviously, a lot of the emphasis here, a lot of people say that, including Jim Pope, the person I interviewed, that people don't realize how important the audio portion of video is, that it's really the most important part of video is the audio. And we've had that discussion in some of your classes that you've taken on video when you have come out with bad video or bad audio, and how much that undermines your video to have bad audio. So anyway, those are all add up to less than 2 hours. So in lieu of my 2-hour lecture, you'll watch these videos. Along with that, I have postponed, and partly because of that, I postponed your last quiz. It was set for Monday the, let's see, it'd be Monday the, anyway, while I'm gone, whatever Monday that is. I guess it'd be next Monday. Well, I postponed it from next Monday until the last Friday and Saturday of the semester before your final exams, because I, among other things, wanted to include the broadcast videos that I posted. So I want to give you some incentive to watch those videos. So in order to do that, I had to postpone the quiz. So the quiz, I'll give you more time to access that quiz. I will make it available on Friday the 10th and on Saturday the 11th, both, so you can do it at your convenience. So it won't be a very tight frame. It will be any time during those 2 days that you can take the last quiz. And it will include the last presentations, the one we just had, for example, and my discussion on that, as well as the videos on video journalism. Any questions? So I'm not going to give any lecture today. I think I did my demonstration yesterday on how to do the magazine assignment. By the way, I mentioned I may have gotten an email on that, but it was interesting that almost as soon as I posted it, the company Quark contacted me about sharing my video, because there's especially not very many videos on either InDesign or Quark from a journalist perspective on how to do publications like you're learning how to do in this class. You won't find much. I've never found, I think I found one with InDesign on how to do a tabloid newspaper, and it was terrible. It was done by a university professor I don't think ever was in the industry. He had no professional experience, I don't think. He had at least no editing experience, because he did a terrible job in what he was teaching the students to do, and a terrible end product. So there isn't much on there from a journalist perspective how to use desktop publishing to create, I've never seen anything on a broadsheet newspaper. As many millions and probably now billions of videos that are on YouTube, I can't find one on how to use desktop publishing to produce a broadsheet newspaper. It may be there, maybe I haven't looked again recently, but I've looked a lot and I could never find it before. Like I said, I only found one with InDesign on how to do a tabloid newspaper, and it was terrible from a professional perspective. And there are some about magazines, but even theirs aren't as practical as I think they need to be, as I would recommend. So I haven't required those of my students, because I don't think they're quite practical enough. So anyway, that's why Quark wants to, they're promoting that video I did yesterday on their Twitter and their YouTube and on their Facebook sites, which is interesting. It was actually not a very good video, I don't think, but The quality I didn't think turned out that well. But anyway, it is what it is. I need to look at my screencast and see if I can improve the quality. Once I blew it up, you couldn't see the detail very well. So anyway, but that nevertheless is good enough for you guys to guide you through your last assignment, I think. We talked about a lot of elements that you could use. You don't necessarily have to use any of them if you don't want to. Use what you want to, but what the key, I think, what I was trying to point out is that with this assignment, with the magazine assignment, I'm basically throwing away the critique sheet. It doesn't relate to a magazine. And I haven't created a critique sheet that covers magazine. So this one's being graded by my gut instinct, by my own, did you do a good job? Were you creative? Were you, and obviously I will look for the basic tool or the basic skills of desktop publishing. Do you know how to make shadow boxes? I didn't make one yesterday, but that would be a good thing. That would be one other element you could use, the shadow box. Do you know how to, just what can you demonstrate to me that you now have gained some expertise in desktop publishing? I showed you how to do cutouts and how to wrap your text around a cutout, for example. That would show some additional expertise that would be valuable to you if you were to get a job that included desktop publishing skills. So, first off, just the overall artistic nature of what you produce, as well as the technical skills you demonstrate, are what I'll be looking for. Obviously, if you misspell words, that's going to be a major knock at this point. You can't be floppy in this work, and so you could expect to lose quite a few points if you misspell a word in a headline. You can't do that. You have to be more meticulous than that. And that will be true also for your final exam. Now, in the final exam, I will be going back to the regular critique sheet, but again, a warning, don't leave misspellings in your headlines. I mean, that is a kiss of death, and I do end up deducting quite a bit when you do that, so don't do that. Be very careful about your spelling. I mean, with the final exam, you've got 4 headlines, and maybe if you have time, 4 subheadlines to write for your final exam. And just be sure you don't have any misspellings in those 8 headlines and subheadlines. That's, like I say, in the industry, that would get you fired very quickly. You have to be very meticulous, and so what you write in original writing is most important are your headlines, and you just can't look like an idiot with your headlines. It doesn't do good for your reputation or for your job security. Okay, so anyway, I won't beat a dead horse on that. If you were not at lecture yesterday, you should probably watch that video. Give you some better ideas on how to proceed with your magazine assignment, because it is quite different from a newspaper. And I'll be looking for different things, especially again for the artistic skills that you demonstrate, as well as the technical skills that are basically a little more advanced. I guess the magazine technical skills are more advanced than newspaper skills. And you're expected to be able to use them because you have, with a magazine in the real world, you have more time to do it. You have a month or sometimes more to produce your publication. So you have time to do things different, to make things more interesting, make things more artistic, that a newspaper editor does not have. They don't have the luxury, because as I said, even with weekly newspapers, you tend to, as a weekly editor, I spent most of the week writing stories and taking photos myself, selling advertising. If I was responsible for advertising as a publisher, I would be involved with the advertising side of the business and with the personnel, the HR aspects of the business. So as an editor / publisher, which I was in many cases for multiple newspapers, my week was very busy until the last day before we went to press, and that's when I got involved with desktop publishing. that's when I started putting out pages. So I still only had 1 day a week to put out a publication, or even multiple publications. In Utah, I was the editor-publisher of 4 publications, so I had to oversee and we had some overlapping pages because they were next door cities that we were running newspapers for. So some pages we could leave the same, but we basically had to redo a lot of them. And so I had to be very involved in the production side of that business, as well as advertising, as well as writing, as well as photography, and so forth. So I was very busy and other things before I got around to production on 1 day a week, even though it was a weekly newspaper. So the newspaper industry, whether they're daily or weekly, they're facing much tighter deadlines than a magazine is, which by its very nature prides itself on being more artistic, prides itself on using more advanced techniques, and puts out, uses slicker paper and does, binds and all that sort of stuff to make their publication look special. And so you have to make your part of the work look special, your desktop publishing. If you're working for a magazine, you have to do special work as well. Okay, with that, I'm going to end it, my video. And again, last call, no more presentations. I haven't looked to see, I know in some of the tutorials we're missing some people that should have already presented that I don't know if they dropped out of class or they're just too shy to present. I don't know. But they haven't presented, and they'll lose those points if they don't present. So just making sure everybody has their chance, because today is it for this, for you guys, this is our last class. Yeah. So appreciate you being in the class. If I'll be getting you your final, your project marks as quickly as I can. Even in Arizona, I'll be working on that. In fact, maybe working on it harder because I won't have so many interruptions by the university. We'll get rid of the university, get away from me. And so I can concentrate in doing that when I'm not involved with the conference itself. So I'll get that all caught up to help you prepare for your final exam. I don't, as I mentioned before, I don't really like the fact that your final exam is worth half of your grade. I think that's too much for a final exam, personally. But it kind of depends on how you teach a class. If I come back and teach this class again, I might have more group projects, because the individual grading is just, the hardest part about this is grading papers with 95 students. That's crazy. Universities like to say that they like to measure somebody's commitment to the university by contact hours, how many hours I actually am in a classroom with you. And so, but the contact hour is the easy part. The hard part is the grading hours. And so I would probably end up having more team projects, although I hate them. I don't think they're the best way of doing it in preparing you. But that in that case, 50% final exam is probably, in that case, is appropriate, because that's maybe one of your only individual projects, and for you to show me if that's how I had run this class. You would have been doing team projects, maybe one individual project before the final exam, which would have left you not as well prepared as you should be going into our final exam. So I don't believe in that. At the same time, I also don't believe in killing myself if the university doesn't understand that you shouldn't have this big of a class in this sort of a class, in this sort of a course. I've never had more than 30 students in an editing class before, so that's, the grading time here has been ridiculous. So I will get it done. I'm sorry, I may not, in some cases, be able to give you as much input, much feedback as I'd like to do, because it's just too much. But you will get your grades back. You'll get an idea of what I like and don't like. I'll give you as much feedback as I can to prepare you for that final exam, which will be 20% your objective portion. That'll be the first 20 minutes of the exam. Nobody will have more or less time than that. It'll be timed on Moodle. So you will go to Moodle and it will open up right at the hour. I'll have you ready to go online to Moodle to start your exam right on the hour. And so you'll have exactly 20 minutes to finish the objective portion, and then the rest of the time, the rest of the 2 hours will be for your design and production of one tabloid page and this jump one page, one story. Just show me how to jump one story, that you know how to do that. And so that will be, you upload that, and that's your final exam. You'll have 4 stories you haven't seen before, and pictures you haven't seen before. I'll provide captions for the pictures, basically. You might, if you use more than one picture, you may have to use a caption and adjust it a little bit. For example, I'll write at least one caption for each set of pictures, and you take it from there if you want to use more than one picture for each story. So, again, also last chance for questions. Any questions about anything? If not, I will stop this and